Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Hill. I am chairman of the Ulster Beekeepers Association, and you're all very welcome to this fifth webinar in a series of 7, which the Ulster Beekeepers are doing instead of running a conference. Unfortunately, COVID has made life very difficult for us. So, we are very, very welcome to listen to this webinar. And we're delighted, in fact, that this evening we have Randy Oliver from California, who will be talking about queen rearing for the small producer. And our sponsor this evening is Burke's Bees from Portadown in Northern Ireland. And we're absolutely very, very grateful to Richard Burke for sponsoring Randy's webinar. And we're very grateful to all the sponsors for all the webinars that we're running. Very appreciative. And I would also really just like to thank some people who have donated to our costs of running these webinars. And we'd again like to thank them very, very much indeed for their consideration. You've got 2 boxes in front of you on your controls. One is the chat box, which we would like you to use to tell us where you're from. And if you could reserve your questions for Randy on the Q&A button. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So we're going to just first have a short film from Burke's Bee Supplies. Okay.
That was wild.
Right. So if we could just like to listen just to our sponsors.
So this is our bee supply store. We should have everything you need here for your beekeeping requirements. We've got all the frames, queen excluders. That's the wire queen excluder with a wooden surround. We also keep the full range of Premier and standard foundation. We do bee suits. This is our store detective. He's modelling it. Doesn't say much. Then we've got nuke boxes, which are great for catching swarms or for splitting the hive into when it comes to the season. So that's a Payne's 6-frame nuke with a side feeder. This one is a Mazemore 6-frame nuke with a top feeder. 6 frames, and then you've got your top feeder. You can syrup in. Then this one's the BS Honeybees nuke box, which is quite ingenious because you can have a middle divider. It's a 6-frame nuke as it is, but with the middle divider you can have 2 3-frame colonies and have a queen on either side or a queen cell to hatch out. So we try to cater for all that you might need. So that's my brief tour of our store. Thanks for having a look around with me. If you can't visit us in person, do look us up on our website, burks-supplies.co.uk, and you can shop on there and we can deliver to your door. But we'd love to see you in person anytime you can make it down to Portadown. And thanks for your time.
Right. Well, very much to thank Richard Burke for that promotion, and to thank Burke's Bee Supplies for their very kind sponsorship of this webinar. Now, I'd really just like to introduce our speaker this evening, and it's Randy Oliver from Northern California. And Randy sees beekeeping through the eyes of a biologist, building a small commercial beekeeping enterprise in the foothills of Northern California. His sons now manage around 1,500 colonies for migratory pollination and produce queens, nooks, and honey, freeing Randy to engage full-time in beekeeper-funded research projects. Randy analyzes and digests the scientific research and is in touch with beekeepers, researchers from all over the world in order not to only broaden his own depth of knowledge, but to figure out best management practices for beekeepers everywhere, which he will then happily shares through his various articles in bee magazines, his speaking engagements, and on his website. It's www.scientificbeekeeping.com, which I would highly recommend to you to have a look at. So really, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Randy for this evening's lecture, which is on queen rearing for the small producer. Randy.
All right, thank you, John. Okay, well, let me go ahead and share my screen. It's crazy busy out here in California right now for beekeepers because this is almond pollination time, and my sons are madly moving hives to almost, we have 19 truckloads of hives to take down and put them down into the almond orchards. So that's what they're busy doing now. So they typically load up in the at dusk the day before, and then take off early in the morning and drop them off down in the orchards. So and then come back home, have an hour or so, and then load up another load and do that day after day. Okay, John, is everything looking good now?
Yep, that's good, John. All right.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm gonna go ahead. I don't see any faces, so if I don't see your face, I don't know if a disaster is happening, John.
Well, it's all right. We're still here, Andy. You're okay.
Okay, if I can see your face, then I know that I'm not just talking to a wall. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so let me start off first. It's really easy to produce just a dozen cells, queen cells at a time, and you can do it right in the field. And here I am out grafting the field. If you're over 40, you probably want to get a magnifying lens like this. And I'm just grafting right out of a frame here, laying up the grafted cells on a damp towel. And then you just take a frame. I usually use a brood or a pollen frame. Scrape with your hive tool, press in those grafted cells, and then 10 days later, it looks like this. You got a bunch of ripe queen cells ready to use. Very, very, very simple. If you're interested in that, just go to my website, look up Queens for Pennies. And there's a whole PowerPoint right there that you guys can look at on your own for just raising a dozen queen cells on your own. But my impression was you guys wanted to learn about scaling up a little bit more than a dozen at a time, where you're doing a few hundred or 1,000 or so at a time. And it all depends upon how many you're going to make. And if you look at the books and talk to other commercial queen producers, you're going to get all kinds of different ways of doing this. And they're all, there's not that any of them are wrong. Here's the thing that I found is that beekeepers tend to make things as difficult as they possibly can. I don't know why beekeepers do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a really simple method. And there's a lot more complicated, more difficult, more equipment methods out there. But this is the method that I've used now for, 40 years here, producing queens. We produce, I don't know, we produce about 3,000 queens a year, and then we sell a few thousand queen cells every springtime ourselves. So we've tested this out thoroughly. And I do have one word of caution right here, is that don't start rearing any queens until you got somebody for them to mate with. So if you wait until you see drones emerging in your colonies, which means that then the drones will have enough time to mature by the time the queens are ready to mate. By mature, I mean the adult drones. After they emerged, they need to go for another almost 3 weeks before they're sexually mature and ready to start mating. So your signal for rearing queens is when there's drones out there for them to mate with. Okay, so this method is really simple. I went out just a few minutes ago and took this photograph and put it into the presentation of the equipment that you would need. And it's very simple. You only are going to need these 4 pieces of equipment. One is just a swarm board, which can be made out of an inner cover by cutting a notch right here and then covering up the inner cover hole. A grafting tool, here's a Chinese grafting tool right here. Then you got to build a frame with some notches and your your cell bars and the frame to hold them right here. And then these plastic cell cups. And we really like this brand of cell cup, the JZ's, BZ's one sold in the US. And there's all kinds of cell cups. And yes, once again, you can make it as complicated as you want. You can have systems where you can try to force the queen to lay eggs inside the cells. Once you've done grafting, you would never, ever think about doing all that really difficult stuff. What I like about this system is that you start with a double deep, a strong double deep, and you end with a strong double deep. Goes right back to this. So you don't have to devote anything special. You're just going to rearrange this double deep right here. And I'm going to go through all this step by step, but I'll just show you in advance. You start with a double deep. You're going to split the top box off and the bottom box. And out of that, you're going to get an empty box. You're going to put in 4 frames, 2 drawn comb, a frame with some young larvae, and a frame with pollen in that. And then you're going to stack the whole thing back together like this, with only 5 of those frames in this box, and 4 frames right now. The queen being down in here underneath the queen excluder. Then what you're going to do is you're going to feed them sugar syrup here. You're going to add the queen cells right in here, and they're going to be in there until just for 1 day. And then a day later, you're going to come back and combine these 5 frames and these 5 frames right in here, and finish the cells in this double deep again. So you're only in this configuration for 1 day. You're going to put the thing right back the same way it was, except for the queen's going to be down below after that. And then when these queen cells are ripe, you're going to pull them out and then put your hive back to the way it was. So it's a very, very simple system to do here. So we're going to start off with the cell starter right here. And so this is called the cell starter. This one temporarily for 24 hours up above. And this will be the cell finisher down here for the rest of the days. You can leave them actually in here up until almost day 12 after you graft. They start, queens start emerging usually on day 11.5 to day 12. So for the cell starter for 24 hours. The best time to rear queen cells and to make queens is when the colonies are wanting to swarm by themselves. So Pierre Giovinazzo up in Quebec did a very good study on that, looking at the quality of queens and the mating of queens reared at different times during the season. You get your best queens reared during swarming season. So you want to start off with healthy colonies. This is Anna we trained to do queen rearing for us, oh geez, 5 years ago. And she comes back every springtime now, and she does most all of our queen rearing for us, and just works 5 days a week and rears just a ton of queens for us. And she just does an incredible job. So started off with good, healthy looking colonies and low mite levels. If you got high mite levels, you're going to have virus issues with your queen. So you want to start with very, very healthy colonies. And you also need lots and lots of nurse bees. So you got to have some strong colonies. Now, if you're just rearing one batch of 50, you don't need a whole bunch. You can just do it with just with one strong hive. If you're rearing multiple batches at a time, then you may want to have some colonies on the side to steal from. Okay, so here we go. Here's our queen right colony with the entrance going in this direction. And we're going to set this up with the 5 frames here with no queen here. Absolutely, you have to make sure there is not a queen, not a virgin. Do not believe for a second that when you open a hive, there's only one queen. About 5% of the time, there's going to be, especially in the springtime, you're going to see 2 queens in that hive. And if you get that queen in here, you won't get any take in of the cells. So you want to make sure that there's no queen here and no queen up here. And then you're going to put your swarm board in here, and your entrance will be to the back. Easiest way to make a swarm board is just simply to take an inner cover right here. I just you can tape this over. I have those swing around aluminum plate right here that covers that hole, and then cut a notch here, 3/8 by 3/8 inch by 3 inches across is plenty, and this goes to the rear. So here it is, placed on top of the hive with the entrance to the rear. So the bee is going to fly out of this for 1 day. You don't care about any forager bees. because forager bees don't raise queen cells. Only nurse bees rear queen cells. So in the typical swarm box, this is enclosed. There's no free flight. What I find is that if you do that, those foragers, they don't want to get out. They're disruptive to the colony. So I just let them just fly right out and fly back home to the bottom box, just keeping nothing but the nurses in here. It also shows you, if you allow the foragers to escape in the first few hours, whether you have enough nurse bees in here. So if when we check back before we do the actual grafting, we make sure that this box is still full of nurse bees. Otherwise, we'll shake extra bees into there. So the cell starter needs to be queenless. Optional, not everybody uses a cell of young larvae, but I like a cell with some young larvae, a frame with young larvae in it. I'll talk about that a little later. One comb with fresh pollen. Fresh pollen is way better than bee bread. Contrary to what you read on the internet, nurse bees prefer fresh pollen way over fermented bee bread. They do not like fermented bee bread as much as they like fresh pollen. Then you have 2 drawn combs to the outside, just so the bees, nurses have some place to store any incoming nectar or sugar syrup that you feed them. Then lots of well-fed nurse bees. Do not take these nurse bees from a poorly nutrition deprived colony. You want that, take it from a colony where they're just pumping out the jelly already. And then you don't want to disrupt their behavior much. So use absolutely the minimum amount of smoke while you do this. So first thing, take your hive apart, find the queen. She's usually going to be in the center right there. And then when you find the queen, put her aside on that frame in a nuke box temporarily. This just saves you the aggravation of going, oh my God, which frame was the queen on? I can't remember. You got to go look for the queen, you wonder where she is. Just put her aside temporarily into a nuke box. Okay, so that avoids you misplacing that queen while you're doing this. Now find a frame of fresh pollen. And in a double deep hive in the springtime, usually your second frame in on the lower box will have this size solid, will be fresh pollen or very freshly made bee bread right here. So we generally go down right to the bottom box, look the second frame in on the inside side and pull that frame out. Then 2 drawn combs on the outside. This gives the bees a place to put any extra incoming nectar or syrup. And here's your, out of order, there's your nice frame of fresh pollen coming in there. And mixed pollens are always the best. Now, if you don't have enough fresh pollen coming in, we keep collected pollen in the freezer. You just pull out a deep drawn comb. Go ahead and take that frozen pollen, just put it on here and then shake the frame until it all levels out. And then spray it down with some sugar syrup, let it sit for an hour, just so it absorbs that and gets sticky. And then put this frame in, and the bees will immediately pack it in and make it into a nice fresh frame of bee bread. This makes great queen cells. You can feed a pollen substitute, but we never do. We just use fresh pollen that we keep in the freezer if necessary. But generally, we don't do any of this. We just pull out a frame of pollen. So here it is after it's been shaken in and sprayed. Then you want some young larvae. And this indicates that this colony is fairly well fed. This one's not tremendously well fed. See, this jelly here on the second instar larva is only covering about 1/3 of the cell bottom. A really, really good, well-fed colony. The nurses will be going out, clear out to the outside right here. So these nurses are going to need extra supplemental feeding. Okay, so here we are. Here is your empty cell starter box above here. Drawn comb, some young larvae facing in, and some pollen here. Now, the reason for the young larvae is that they orient the nurse bees. They do so. The nurse bees know that this space is the core of the colony because of the young larval pheromone and the bee bread here. So then they will form a cluster around those young larvae. The second thing is the stimulation of the E-beta osmium, the young larval pheromone, causes the nurse bees to produce jelly. If they don't have young larval stimulation, pheromone stimulation, they don't produce jelly. So they're going to sit here for a few hours, smelling these young larval pheromone and be feeding them. Once you put the queen cells in, they will preferentially feed the queen cells over the young larvae. So we don't see any problem with leaving the young larvae in here. Although some other queen producers, they don't keep any young larvae in here. And what you're going to do, so this is a preview. We're not here yet. I'm showing you that the queen cells, the grafted queen cells, are going to go in between these frames. So let's go back here. You're going to set it up like this, let them sit for a few hours, and a few hours later, you're going to come back with the queen cells in. Okay, now you got to add bees from the brood nest. Now, if it's a good flight day, you can shake every damn bee in the whole hive up into that cell starter, and enough of the foragers and older bees will fly back to take care of the queen and the brood down below. So now I'm shaking these bees into these cell starter. The older bees will fly back. The young bees that you want to keep up here, they're going to stay inside here. And then I'm going to put 10 frames back into the bottom box, put a queen excluder over it. So here's my starter sitting right here. There's the bottom box reassembled. You put the queen back into the bottom box, put a queen excluder over it. And now you're going to take your extra 5 frames or whatever you have left over and put 5 frames back into this box. And then the starter is going to go back over the top of here over a swarm board. And so eventually, so here's your 5 frames in here. Here's the 5 frames up here. You're going to wind up putting these in here the next day. Now you're going to put your starter on top over those 5 frames right here. And here's the entrance facing backwards. And here it is all put together. So temporarily, this is your starter swarm box. Now, the cooler the weather, the stronger you got to make that cell starter. We want to, even in warm weather, we want our cell starters to look like this. Just tons and tons of bees. Any older bees will fly out of the entrance and they're going to fly back home with very, very quickly. So any bees in here will be young bees, and these bees don't stink. You can go into these bees with impunity. You really have to use any smoke at all because you only have young bees. This is one of the reasons I like this, the queen right modified swarm box. You never have stingy bees. If you use a queenless system, you got to put all your gear on. We work all day long working with these, no gear, no veil on, no gloves. It's not a problem because it's nothing but young, non-defensive bees. And then unless their abdomens are already full of nectar, we shake them down with sugar syrup afterwards and let them lick it off each other so they are well fed with syrup or nectar. And they'll just lick all this right up, no problem. But look at that. I got bees on all the combs and on the inside of the boxes here. If necessary, you want to add additional nurse bees if you don't have enough of them. What we use is a sieve box. It's just a medium super with a queen excluder nailed or screwed to the bottom. And it's nice to touch to put aluminum on the inside. It makes it easier to brush the bees off. So here's a sieve box sitting over the cell starter. You see the bees clustering here. And now we're going to pull out brood frames of young brood. Look to make sure you don't have a queen, but she can't get through the excluder anyway. And just shake them right in here. And the old bees will fly back and the young nurse bees will stay here on top of the queen excluder. And then I didn't make a picture of it, but a tip is take your bee brush. Go find the softest bee brush you can find. Get an animal hair bee brush. So when I go to the bee supply, the conventions, I always look for the vendors. A lot of times the Chinese vendors have these very, very nice soft brushes. Cut the handle off it right here. Now this one, you're going to hold, once the handle's off, you can put it sideways in here and you tickle the bees' backs. So the trick for using a sieve box is not to blast them with smoke. That just confuses them. That's like being in a blindfolded in a smoky room. You don't know which way to go. You put just a little tiny whiff of smoke right along the top edge here, and that makes the bees walk down. Then you take your very soft brush and just tickle them really lightly on the back, and bingo, they'll go right through the queen excluder. The tickling is just, that's the trick. They'll all go through except for any drones or any queens. Your mated queen, your laying queen, your virgin queens, they can't get through. And you can pick that queen up and take her out. So you only want queenless bees in there. And then you're going to feed them if there's no nectar flow. If there's a nectar flow on, you don't want to feed them. The thing is, if you feed them too much, they will draw comb between the queen cells. They'll build and draw a white comb. That's a pain then to cut the queen cells out. So this is, you have to learn with experience just how much nectar or syrup they need to have coming in. And I put a jar on top. So we like this top feeder jar so we can always see how much syrup they're taking. Then we come back after an hour and check. And we'd like to see clusters of bees hanging on either side of those empty spaces. That means that all these frames are covered with bees, and now you have enough here. And the reason is that we rear queens early in the spring, okay, independent of the weather. So here I am rearing queen cells right here. And everybody always says, "Oh God, no, we can't rear queens this early in the season." That's nonsense. This is us. This is not atypical for me rearing queen cells right here. And there's a bar of grafted cells going in right there, and they're going to be just fine because by the time these emerge 12 days later, we've already looked at the weather. We know the weather is going to be changing, and they'll be able to have flight conditions. They're going to emerge in 12 days, in 12 days, and then they're not going to even mate for another 7 days after that. So you're talking 19 days out. Well, you don't know the weather 19 days out. So if you think there's a good chance the weather is going to be okay 19 days out, we just charge ahead and we go ahead and rear our queen cells. Okay, so here we are. Set up again, queen right, nest, the entrance back here, 5 frames, rear entrance here, starter right here with 5 frames, and the swarm board right here. Now you wait a few hours. You're going to let those nurse bees realize they're queenless because they got no queen pheromone, because what you've done, any queen pheromones way down here. You don't get enough transferred to this box, and you got this solid swarm board right here. So they don't have any queen pheromones. So they know they're queenless. So you're going to wait until they know they're queenless in order to, before you graft. Okay, so now let's look at the breeder queens. You don't have to do this, but this is I'm going to show this to you as though you were rearing a few hundred queen cells at a time. We set on my back porch. I set up all my breeders queens, and I keep them in singles. If it's a breeder queen, she's going to be a really good queen, which means if you don't steal bees from them, they're going to all swarm. You'll lose all your breeders, and that's very frustrating to lose a breeder by swarming before you graft. So I take all my breeder colonies and knock them down to a small size and have them lined up right here. And then I control which frames they lay on. We pick out the frames that we want to graft off of. And these are old, dark, drawn combs. We want to confine the queen to that drawn comb. And I make these modified frames out of a sheet of plywood. And I just cut a queen excluder in half and then cut out that shape and then staple them in here. And it depends upon your dimensions of your queen excluders, okay? But these go all the way down to the bottom of the that single, so that the queen can't get out. So it's the depth of the box plus the bee ways underneath. So here's a single right here with the breeder queen confined to this one frame with queen excluder on either side right here. And then we're going to shove these frames back together. Then I have a rotation system. So I keep 6 frames in rotation right here. So the queen's laying right here, and twice a week I move them. So the 6 frames twice a week is one 21-day brood cycle. It works out just perfect. So on Saturday I put the queen in here, and then 3 days later on Tuesday, then I will then move this frame over to here and take this frame, which was emerging brood, and put it into here, and put the queen on this one, and now she will lay the eggs following the last. This is day 21 for this one, so all the brood will be emerged by the next day, and she can then relay this frame, and then this frame right here, a couple of days later, will be egg or larvae ready for grafting. So we do all our grafting off of this frame, and then after we graft, we put this frame back in here and just keep with the rotation. So we keep these 6 frames in rotation twice a week. This is a huge trick if you want to always be able to easily have several hundred larvae of the right age to graft. Okay, so after a few hours, we're going to go back to the cell starter. We're going to look for first instar larvae. So this is a first instar larva right here, just about the size of the egg laid down. Here's a second instar larva. That's too old. That's a second, almost third instar larva, way too old to graft. You want to graft only first instar larvae that have not yet molted. Okay, so here we're looking again here. These are all too old right here. These are all second instar larvae. Okay, so here we go right here, and oh, you can't see the top from the screen, but this that showing there's the size of the egg, there's the size of a larva. Notice that it's just the larva is the same length as an egg. And here's a picture I made. I keep this one up on my grafting room for the help. This is the size larvae you'll be grafting. These first instar, these are all too old right here. One more perfect size right here, too old. So first instar, second instar larvae. And you're gonna, if you're over 40, you're gonna want to put your magnifying glasses on or driller's loop for this. Okay, what we find here in California, it's often very dry when we're grafting. You're going to read in all the books that said, oh, keep your grafting room warm. There's no reason for that. Larvae have no problem getting chilled. You can, they can get chilled, they'll be just fine. It's not the temperature that's important, it's the humidity. You can't let them dry out. They're susceptible to desiccation. So we use a sprayer to keep everything damp all the time. And we always keep our larvae that we run for grafting always covered with a nice sterile, damp towel. Now you need your cell cups. Now you can just pick off a bunch of these cell cups off of frames, and these you can graft into these just fine. But believe it or not, the bees actually prefer these plastic cell cups over natural cell cups. And there's another style here that goes into a group. We don't like this style as much as this style because these fit into the frame a lot easier when you press them into the combs. And what we find is after the queen has emerged from these cells in the colony and the bees polish these out, later in the season or next spring, if the bees want to make a supersedure cell or a swarm cell, they will always use these plastic cells preferentially over a natural cell. They really do like these plastic cells. Now we spray the inside of the cells very lightly with with clean water right here. This keeps the humidity up inside the cell. And then we flip these over upside down onto a damp towel to keep them moist until we graft into them. And we like this little handheld pump-up sprayer, these little misters, a very fine mist. We like this brand a whole lot. Then we get to grafting. And here's the Chinese grafting tool here. And usually when I talk to beekeepers, they just go into panic when I say using a Chinese grafting tool or grafting. I say, hey, if you can figure out how to use a Q-tip without poking your eardrum out, you can master learning how to graft with a grafting tool. Okay, so let's take a look at the Chinese grafting tool. The mistake people make is you don't push down on the plunger until you've already got the larva on the tongue. You don't start off pushing down on the plunger. That once you understand that, and I show how to do this, people go, oh my God, that is so easy to do. I can't believe it. You need to use it only on an old, dark, well-used drawn comb where the bottoms are rounded with the old cocoons. The Chinese tool does not work on fresh combs that have square bottoms. You need a rounded bottom. So we pick out a bunch of frames that look like this, and these are dedicated in the springtime just for us to have the queens, the breeder queens, lay eggs into so we can graft easily. We like to take Anna great big frames of all even age larvae on these frames, and then she can graft several hundred queen larvae off of one frame. Okay, so these instructions are all on my website on that Queens for Pennies. And what you do is you just, without pushing down the plunger, you just slide the tongue down. It hits the bottom here, and it scoots right underneath the jelly, underneath the larva. It never touches the larva. And then, so now the tongue goes all the way into the larva, and then you just lift this up. Now this just took a fraction of a second, just down and up. And now when it comes up, capillary action holds that jelly to the Chinese grafting tool with the larva. Again, you've never touched the larva. The larva remains on the jelly that it was already eating, that the nurses had put there. So there's no priming of these cells. Okay, and here I am pulling a larva out of a cell right here. Then you put it into your plastic cell cup, and now you push a plunger down, and the plunger doesn't touch the larva, it hits the jelly, and it pushes the jelly and the larva onto the cell. If you pinch the larva with the plunger, then you have to just, you pull it out and you lick it off, and you're done. By the way, yes, we do lick them off. You wind up eating a lot of royal jelly when you're grafting a lot, because we just use our lips to clean off the grafting tool. So if there's any question as to whether you touch the larva with the plunger, we just pull it out and eat the larva and eat the jelly. Here's the other trick I learned, especially when you get over 40. We graft in a pitch black room. Now, I grafted for many years out in daylight when I had young eyes and all of that. But if you're going to do full-scale grafting, you put on an LED headlamp, and I actually make a little tube of aluminum around it. So I just have one little spot in that black room. Your entire universe is that one little spot of light right here. And it makes it so easy to find the larva. Here's my son grafting next to me right here. I'm going to show you right now what actual, what it looks like when we are grafting. About this speed. This is the rate that we graft queen cells on. Okay, it's very easy. This is the whole process, just one cell to the next, just about that speed right there. Very, very easy. So we graft this whole bar, there's 18 or 17 cells on a bar, and we just graft them in just a few minutes, so 18 on a bar. After you graft it, it looks like this. There's the larva floating in the original jelly that she was already in. This larva has never been disturbed. Oops, I don't know why I got two pictures there. Okay, here's an antigrafting right here. And as soon as she gets those done, she puts them over here. She picks up the ones that we've already sprayed already, and then she gets in other rows of them and puts them down here, keep them damp until we put them into the frame and carry them out to the cell starter. Now we're going out to if the humidity is low, we wrap them in again, that sterile damp cloth to take them out to the cell starter. If the humidity is high, you don't have to worry about it. We label our graft number for the year, our queen letter or number, the date on it, put it into the cell starter. Okay, after 1 day into the cell starter now, you're gonna pull out and you look with those plastic cell cups with the holes drilled through. I like this style because you can look down here and say, look at all that jelly. That white means that every one of those took. That one did not take. There's no white, nor that one. All the rest took. So just with one glance, you can see what your takes were, what percentage of them were fed by larvae. If they take here, they're going to generally wind up being a full queen cell. And there, look closer, you can see that jelly already after 24 hours. And if you pull it out, you can see that the nurses or the mid-age bees have already started drawing out building comb cell walls with the queen cells. So after 24 hours, this is what it looks like. This larva now is fed way more jelly than she can possibly eat. That's the reason why she becomes a queen rather than a worker, is because there's no magical property of the jelly that you just fed far in excess of what a worker is fed. A worker is simply a starved queen. The queen is the default for any female egg, unless you starve it. If you starve it, it turns into a worker. If you don't starve it, then it turns into a queen bee. A little close up here of this 24-hour-old, well, this is now be 48-hour-old second Instar larva with more jelly than she can possibly eat. We also now pull out the larva frame that was put in with the cell starter, and you got to check it to see if there's any volunteer queen cells in here. Otherwise, you get virgins hatching out. The virgins then will tear down all your queen cells that you grafted. So here is some volunteer emergency queen cells in the larval frame. So you want to go ahead and scrape all those out. So that's always check on that. The virgins emerging are always a problem. Okay, so now after 24 hours with your take, they no longer have to be in a cell starter. They can go into the cell finisher. So we just drop those 5 frames right down and rearrange back into our double queen right colony. So here's your queen below the excluder, and now here's your 5 frames that you had in the starter. And you spread the 5 frames that were below, and you drop this right back into here. Okay. Although there's now queen pheromone being exposed through the queen excluder, once they've started, those cells, as far as this colony knows, it's preparing to swarm. So it's going to go ahead and continue to raise all those queen cells. Essentially, what you're doing is you're rearing swarm cells here in a row. Here we go again. There's your frame of pollen. There's your young larvae, and there's your queen cells right here. And here's how it looks from the side view, right back to the double. So it's only a triple for 24 hours. Hang on. Okay, so we go right back to the double D. And then here we have a bunch of them right here, finishing off cells. F means finishers, so finisher 1, 2, 3. So we're rearing, every one of these has 50 queen cells in it. So this is how we produce them. So you're looking at 500 queen cells right here. And then you wait by day 7, they look like this, just beautiful bars of queen cells. The bees off of them. So that one didn't take, that one didn't take, and that one. So there's a possibility of 54 queen cells right here. And Anna was pretty proud when she would get a really good take. So I hung a loud bell up with a ringer in the yard. And anytime that she gets a take of over 50, she gets to ring that bell. So we all know that Anna got at least 50 out of 54 for a take. Okay, that means you know what you're doing. Okay, when you start getting 50 taking out of 54 possible. So that's a good, we call that a good take. And they look beautiful. And they all still have plenty of jelly. The point is, this queen larva is not done eating. She's going to continue to eat for 2 more days after the cell is capped over. And we want to actually, the best queen cells are those that when the queen emerges, they still have uneaten food. That means she was fed absolutely to excess. Now, what we do is just to make sure nothing happens out in those frames, you don't get a queen loose or something. Typically, sometimes 7 or 9 days after grafting, we'll move them into an incubator. Once they're in the incubator, we know nothing's going to go wrong, and because we sell a lot of these. So we have an ant-proof box right here, and I just modify upright freezers and make them into an incubator. Here's a picture here. These are cans, gallon cans full of water, sealed up. These are just a heat reservoir, so that when we open the door and close it, they can get the temperature right back immediately to what it should be. There's a pan of water down here with a fan on it for keeping the humidity up. And we have I just have make these up with a small output hair dryer on a thermostat, which keeps the temperature on in here. You want something that doesn't have much overshoot. And so you want to keep them right at 94 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 34, 35 centigrade, and humidity about 60 to 70% relative humidity. One of the problems is black queen cell virus, where the sides turn black and these larvae just turn dark and shrivel up. And we have not found any magic. It comes and goes, and sometimes it's just so disappointing where it'll take out hundreds of queen cells at a time. And you think you're going to figure out some trick or some treatment, and it just disappears on its own. So you're going to hear all kinds of recommendations. We've tested them. We haven't found anything other than just keep your mite levels low. The other thing is bad timing. When you go into the incubator and all the cells have hatched and you have a whole incubator full of virgin queens walking around. Now you can pick those virgin queens up and put them in cages and introduce them, or just let them walk into your queenless nukes. But that's always a bummer when you have accidental emergence that you weren't planning on. Okay, so now the queens will start emerging. They'll all emerge by day 12, sometimes day 11, and on rare occasions, even day 10 and a half. So we put ours in on day 10 into our nukes. So we want our nukes to sit for 24 hours before we put the queen cell in. So on day 9 after grafting, and we do have a calendar. Well, I should make a picture of that showing our grafting calendar. I'll have to add that in here. You have to keep track of everything. Day 9, we make our nukes up. So we go out, set up our nuke assembly line, and we just blast through making up nukes. And I showed this to you last time in our nuke making. So I'm not going to go into nuke making here. I mean, again, we make them when the weather's good. We make them when the weather is bad. Again, this queen is not going to fly out to mate for 7 days, generally at the minimum, sometimes a little earlier than that. So if you, on your 10-day weather forecast, if it's looking like it's going to be good anytime in the next 2 weeks, we'll go ahead and make all these nukes up and count on the weather changing. Okay, we use a 5-frame nuke box, but we only put 4 frames in it. A drawn comb on one side, honey on the other side. So if they need food, here's the honey. If they need space to store nectar, it's over here. We put in 2 brood frames right here and the queen cell right here. You can also take a deep box and put in a division board here and build them the same way, except for now, you don't put the honey on one side and the drawn comb on the other. You put both broods towards the divider board, and then your drawn comb and then your honey, depending on the weather. If the weather's cold, but they can't fly, put the honey next to the brood. If there's a nectar flow on, put the honey away and give them the drawn comb next to the brood. And on the other side, you do the same. You're going to put brood against the plywood because they're going to share the heat through that plywood for the brood right here. And just a divider board and 2 entrances, and we made the queens out just fine with the deep box with the divider board. If we use the 5-frame nuke boxes, we just put them in pairs with the entrance facing different directions. You put them in pairs, so when you get down your knees and kneel down to check them, you can check 2 at once without having them to move. Just a time-saving way of doing this. And we use lots of landmarks. Here's a drone we put out here. We'll put like white logs out or boards out near the edge of a hedge or trees. The more landmarks, the better, to help the virgins, when they take their flight, find their way back to their nuke. Okay, after 24 hours, the nukes are ready for sale. So we built a special jig, so you can't buy these, but this jig is really cool. My brother built it for me. We just pop in the cell bar right here, and we just pull the lever, and it just pops all the cells out gently, and they're all pushed out of here. And then we put them in a bowl or a container. And then here's queen cells ready to be placed in the nukes. Notice the amount of jelly in here. This is the only one where the larvae ate all the jelly out. This means these queen cells were all fed to excess. They had more food than the larvae could possibly eat. So this is the way you get your very, very best queens right here. This is your test for if they were fed adequately. Then we put them in the incubator. We keep a beer cooler, and we make we take gallon bags and put in some sodium polyacrylate, the diaper absorbent, and water to make a gel pack, and leave that already pre-warmed and a towel already pre-warmed in the incubator, so we can put them in here and they carry our and cover them with a pre-warmed towel. We can take them out to the yard to install them without them getting chilled. When we sell them, and there's a big market for queen cells, you can make selling queen cells is one of the most profitable things you can do in beekeeping. If they bring their own incubator box, we take a digital thermometer, infrared thermometer, and we check the temperature in here, because people tend to bring them in too warm and they cook the batch of queen cells, and they're disappointed that none of them emerged. So we won't even put them into their box unless we've checked the temperature. And out in the field, we just spread the frame slightly and just squeeze it in. We always want the queen cell touching brood. If you put it up in honey and it's a cold night, the queens don't keep the queen cell warm and the queen cell gets chilled. So the queen cell needs to always touch brood. We just do this. We're generally barehanded, maybe a tiny puff of smoke, and lightning fast. We go through here, spread the frames, put a queen cell, and put the frames back together, all done. Because we've only got 4 frames in a 5-frame box. It's very, very easy to put the queen cells in. If you put 5 frames in, it's much harder. There was another one in. Now, if you do make the nukes the same day, a lot of times the bees will they'll kill the queen cell, they'll chew into the side of it and kill it if they haven't sat for 24 hours. So if you make it the same day, the nuke, either put tape around the queen cell or put a cell protector. If you just protect the sides of the cell, the bees will not chew the pupa out. There it is, pushed into there, and you pushed it into your frame. Okay. When you go back for a check back, and we typically check back after 2 weeks, we now check back after 17 days, so we need an oxalic acid dribble also. You can see if you missed any queens from your nukes. So this one obviously has you missed it and a queen went into here. She would have killed the queen cell, and she's attracted bees from the other nukes because this was the only queen right one in the yard. So these are super strong. So what we do at this point, we either pull the frames out and find the queen, kill the older queen, and add these frames of bees to any weak nukes, or what we do now is we just keep these. We just put her immediately. Now this box after 2 weeks is going to be wall-to-wall sealed brood in here. This colony is ready to explode. We just take her back home, put her in a single, and now we have another colony started with a second-year queen in full laying condition. Okay, the queens are going to emerge 11 to 12 days after they are grafted. Emerged queen, you can see a perfectly round circle, often with a little round door hanging from it. If it's irregular from the side, that means she was chewed out. She did not emerge. And emerged cells, they tend to leave like this. The bees don't clean them up for a while. Chewed out cells, they will often remove quickly. Okay. And then you have their version coming out. Versions are a little bit difficult to spot, especially an untrained eye, because they're the same size essentially as the worker. But their hips are a little bit different in shape than our workers, and they walk differently than the workers do. That's another version right here. Another version right here. Again, you got to get a trained eye to really see the birds, but you don't have to see the birds generally. Okay, now mate out, 7 days after emergence. Now here's a reality check. You're going to have almost no control of your matings unless you flood the area around your mating yard with many of your own hives. So if don't be under the delusion that you're going to have a breeding program going if you only have a few colonies. We bring back 1,000 hives chock full of drones, all of our own stock from the almonds, and we flood several square miles of our area with our drones to control our matings. There's no way you're going to control your matings with only a few. Now that may not be a problem if you got good stock in the surrounding area. Queen flies out for mating. You can see the drones chasing her up here, the virgin queen's right up here. And here you see the actual act right here with a drone mounting the virgin queen. And I'm going to blow this area up right here. There's a big drone mounting the virgin queen. And here is the last lucky drone that just mated with her, dropping off after mating. Okay, caught this right. I caught this with a little pocket camera. If you go to a commercial mating yard, the queens don't get very far off the ground before a drone comet heads in. They start mating, 10 feet off the ground. The queen returns then to the nuke with the mating sign, the endophallus of the last drone right here. The workers need to remove this. The queen can't remove it herself. And then she, at first, the bees can entirely ignore her. She's a mated queen, but she hasn't changed her pheromonal output yet. So the bees don't treat her like a queen. But over the next couple of days, she'll start slowing down her movements, paying more attention to the cells, and you'll start seeing some bees turn towards her as she starts to produce queen pheromone. After mating, before she mates, she doesn't she does not attract a retinue in any way. And then her ovaries swell up, and then the bees start paying attention to her. Then the first eggs appear 10 to 12 days after emergence, if after queen emerges. If the weather's been good, earliest I've ever seen is 8 days, but it's usually 10 to 12. So 14 days is a good amount of time to wait. And then you'll see the eggs laid in these cells. So you check for mate out then, and usually we'll get about 80% success of mate out in good weather. That's 80% is 4 out of 5. That's a critical number. You'll see in a second. And go back and start checking the nukes for mate out. And you're going to want to see this kind of laying pattern. Don't be surprised if you see a young queen lay more than one egg in a cell. Sometimes a vigorous queen, if she doesn't have enough warm cells prepared for her, she'll put 10 eggs in one cell, but they won't be on the sides. They'll be on the bottom. And by 2 weeks, you're going to want to start seeing these nice patterns like this. So this shows you've got a nice, well-mated queen. You don't have any diploid drones in here to speak of. So this nice, good thing. Here's the nuke box that we're going to be selling this nucleus with. This is a plastic nuke box. And the most important thing, you see this nice retinue, meaning this queen is going to be she's going to be the heart of this colony, because the bees just really like the way this queen smells right here. And here's Derek Maness. Years ago, he was a foreman at a beekeeping operation. And when I was visiting, he said, "Randy, today's the day I should check mate out. The first time I've ever tried rearing queens." And he goes over here, and I pull my camera out, and I caught him, the proud father of the first queen that he ever raised. And she's laying eggs, and he's just as happy as can be. So I get goosebumps looking at this picture, because this is the way I feel every time. There's nothing like the feeling of rearing your own queen bees. All right, that's it. I got open for questions.
Right, Randy, thank you very, very much indeed. That was fascinating. It's a very interesting to see your setup and to see that your family business and how it's all integrated. Right, okay. We shall start off. As I say, we'll probably have a period, of maybe about 15 or 20 minutes. I apologize we don't get all the questions answered, but certainly if you have any questions that you would like to ask to Randy and we don't get them in this session, you can always email them.
Yep.
Okay.
And John, I still have that list. I've just been so busy, I haven't had a chance to answer it, but it's up on my computer. I will get to all those questions from last time too.
Right, okay. Right, our first question is from Jim Lawson. And he said, "Is the swarm board completely closed in the middle box?
Yes.
And do you let the nurse bees polish out the plastic cups before grafting?"
We haven't found that to be necessary. If you reuse your cups, yes. So you can take all your leftover queen cups and reuse them. And the two techniques, one is you put them in a big box and let wax moth come in, and the wax moth cleans them all out. The other is we put a little bit of washing soda, not detergent, just sodium carbonate washing soda into cut the beeswax, heat them up, bring them to a boil, and then rinse them off really well. And then the used ones we do put back in to a colony and let them be polished. But the fresh ones off the shelf, we don't find any reason to clean them, to let the bees clean them first.
Right, okay. The next question is from Ludker. And I'll not read the whole question, but he's really talking about trying to introduce a Varroa resistance program into his bees as part of his breeding program. And his problem really is this scheme is the limited size of my apiary, about 50 hives. Do you have any suggestions how to start my own Varroa resistance breeding program?
Stop dreaming. There's no way in the world you're going to control the genetics well enough, unless you're in an area where there are a wild stock of honeybees that are exhibiting resistance, and that would control your matings. But other than that, 50 hives, you'd have unless you have isolated mating yards, and that is possible. Like here, we do have areas that I can drive to that are either too high elevation or out in the middle of the desert, where there's a valley, irrigated valley, where there are no honeybees living there unless I bring in hives. And then that's like being on an island in the middle of the ocean. So any drones would only be from colonies you brought in. So unless you can come up with an isolated mating yard, I doubt you're going to be able to do too much selection. I hate to tell you that. I'll tell you right now, in our program, we've been selectively breeding for Varroa resistance now for several years. Tell you what, I'm going to do a different PowerPoint here in a second. Let me, I'm going to, okay, hang on a second, let me check this out here. Files, see if I got this here. I guess I don't have it open. Okay, oops, let me, oh, now I gotta get rid of this. How do I do this? Let's see, where I go. Oh, I want to get back to you, John.
Yeah, that's all right. We say we'll leave this one for another time.
I know. I'm trying to get this picture off my screen so I can get back to you. I go with Zoom. That's what I got to do. There we go.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I was going to show you the graph of our progress after 6 years.
Right.
We started off with 0.2% of our colonies exhibiting resistance. So only a tiny amount. We've worked our way up now. After 6 years of selective breeding, we hit about 18% this year of our colonies are exhibiting resistance. So this is where I'm selecting only 25 breeders out of 1,500 hives every year. So very strong selection. Out of 1,500 hives, 1,475 don't pass their genetics on. Okay, other than their drones. But the queens make all the drones for the next year. So very strong selective pressure. After 6 years of doing this, we've worked our way up to about 17 or 18% of our colonies exhibiting resistance. So I just try to give you a reality check. If you're thinking a miracle is going to happen in your yard and you're going to, with a few hives, be able to breed for mite resistance, it's unlikely that it's going to be happen quickly.
Okay, right. Okay. Well, I think it's a thing that, say, Varroa resistance is something that we could always talk about again sometime.
Absolutely.
Great subject. Yeah.
And I'd be happy to show you I got a whole PowerPoint on how to do it.
Right. Okay. Next question is from Stuart, and he said, so with the queen right box and finisher as one colony only being separated with an excluder and effectively being in swarm mode, will you get issues with the queen attempting to swarm once the cells are capped?
You would think so, but we don't see that. Even with the 50 queen cells in that box, and that's one of the reasons that we take them out. We don't leave them in there until they're ready for emergence. But it's really rare that we ever have a cell finisher swarm. You would think that they would, but we don't see that.
Right. Okay. Just one here to say, how do you sterilize your towels? I presume that's just to make sure that no infection passes on.
Well, that was actually a joke. If you would have looked at that towel, you would have seen it was all covered with black mold.
All right. Okay. When you were, this is from Hillary, when you were adding extra bees, were they from the queen right box below or from another hive?
Both. Either or. If you have enough in the queen right box below, that's good. We find in cold weather, we often have to add more bees from another box too, other hives. So we keep a bunch of just support hives in the same yard just for stealing bees from.
Okay. There's some Alan. Did I hear you say that you use oxalic acid to treat the nukes? If so, when?
On day 18, after you make the nuke, all the brood is going to be emerged by day 21. So if the weather's warm, by day 20, every bit of brood will be emerged there. The virgin queen mates, and she won't start laying eggs until about that same day 21. I'm sorry, 8 days before that. So it's 8 days before any mice can enter her brood. So you have this very narrow treatment window right around sometime around day 18, where there are virtually no mites in sealed brood. There's no sealed brood in that colony. So we come back now, and that's the day we check for queen rightness, and we also hit them with oxalic. Oh, I didn't make a point. I missed something in the. I just put that presentation. Okay, the reason we only put 4 frames into a 5-frame nuke, because I said 4 out of 5 typically made out, which means you have 1 box out of 5 with 4 frames with covered with bees, but no queen. So we just take those 4 frames and fill in the 5th hole in the other 4 nukes. So we make 5 nukes for mating, but we wind up with 4 out of 5 queen right with 5 frames.
Right. Funny, that was one of the questions that was just coming up, so you just answered it.
Great. I was prescient. I read the mind.
Right. Let's see. Do the queen cells all have to be? Sorry, I think it's all have to be kept upright when moving them.
No.
Right.
They're only. The people talk about how gentle they can be damaged. That was from one study that they found out that if you drop queen cells on the ground, that at day 10, they are developing their wing pads and they could possibly damage a wing pad. Of course, everybody takes that one little tiny study and says, oh God, you have to treat them so gently. No, you don't have to treat them gently in any way. You can treat them any way you want.
Okay, there's a question from Roger Patterson, who's a well-known beekeeper in England.
Oh yeah, yes.
Have you any
Thank
tips?
you, Roger.
Have you any tips for introducing a virgin queen?
You know what? We haven't really worked on that. Like Larry Connor loves doing it. He's a large queen producer in the US. The virgins are accepted very well by the bees because they don't have any queen odor to them. So they just walk right in there. So we often if we have virgins, we just drop them right in and we often get a good take. Other people have methods, but I have not experimented myself. So since I don't have any hard data, I have to say, I don't know.
Right, okay. If you have more queens than you can handle, how do you recommend storing them?
In nukes. Okay, now we will bank them. We put them in cages sometimes, and then we take a frame that has a screen on both sides, a wide screen, a 1/2-inch screen, a hardwood cloth we call it, so that there's access, and you can put a whole bunch of them into a queenless small colony with lots of young nurse bees and frames of young brood, and you have to keep adding fresh nurse bees and young brood all the time. Now that's called a queen bank. That queen bank might swarm every single day. The bees say, oh my God, we got all these queens in here, we better swarm. They fly out, they go land on a tree, and then somebody says, hey guys, there's no queen in the swarm. Okay, we all better go back home. And they all go back home. And they may do that every day. So that's called the queen bank. And you can bank queens in a queen bank, lots of nurse bees and some young brood in there. And I guess the question is, how many are you talking about storing? Now, we store a bunch at home, like I showed last time, in nukes for our own use in weak nukes. That's the best way to store a queen, in her own individual weak nuke with bees.
Right, okay. Next is from Julian Martin. He said the American Canadian beekeepers appear to be able to rear bees which can be inspected with minimal or no personal protective equipment. The UK channels all show the keepers with suits and gloves of all guises and bees generally flying around the face veil. how do you get the gentle bees as in the USA?
Oh, it's a very simple selection process. You kill the queen of any colony that stings you.
Right. Okay.
And it very quickly, it's very, very easy to breed for gentle bees. Okay, you just don't have it. You have a zero tolerance policy. We write these letters on a card or on top of any colony that indicates the queen needs to be replaced, and we write HOT. Okay,
Right.
and that tells you that's a hot colony. We want to get rid of that queen either right now or as soon as possible.
Right. Okay.
So of traits to select for, gentleness is one of the easiest.
Right. Okay. This way from a fascinating way from a new beekeeper here. So the number of queens you rear, are they pre-ordered by beekeepers, or do you just predict how many you will need and end up having killing a number of them if you've too many?
Unfortunately, yes, because we have to plan for weather and stuff, and it just I'll tell you right now, it just breaks my heart when you go, oh my God, we got extra 200 beautiful virgin queens hatching out right now, and we don't have the nukes for them. We don't have anybody to take them right now, and we got to just let 200 beautiful virgin queens die. And it doesn't happen often. Usually we can find somebody who wants them, but yeah, it's like raising your own kids and then having to let them die because you can't take care of them. So unfortunately, that does not often, but enough that it's just just turns my stomach to do it.
No, it's not easy indeed. Actually, Randy, we've been answering questions now for nearly about 20 minutes, so I think I'll make this the last question. Okay.
Okay.
And it's from Sebastian. He said, how do you manage selection of breeding queen lines to get them the best genetics?
There's no magic to it. You got to realize that every cultivar of crop, of plant, of fruit, of vegetable, and every kind of livestock, every breed of dog were all developed before anybody knew anything about genetics or any kind of our genes or genomes or any of that stuff. You simply just select year after year for traits that you can see, or that you can, in the case of stinging, traits that you can feel.
Right.
Yeah, and you just select for the ones there's two kinds of selection. There's positive selection and there's negative selection. Negative selection is what we would do for gentleness. You just kill all the hot ones and you keep the rest. Positive selection is for something like Varroa resistance, where you select only those colonies that exhibit Varroa resistance and you breed from them. So and you can do the two of them together, positive selection and negative selection. So that's the simple answer for breeding.
Right. Okay. Well, Mr. Randy, thank you very, very much indeed. That was a fascinating lecture, and then we're getting some feedback here through the chat line, and it's all been very positive.
I see that. Thank you, everybody. I'm glad you find that's what I need to see is that feedback tells me that I'm putting together. I'm not going too fast and not too much detail, not too little detail. So I need to add that one slide about combining the frames back in there.
Right. Well, certainly then, I'd just like to say, really, for a start, if anybody would like to see these lectures again, you have registered on the Ulster Beekeepers website, and these webinars will be available towards the end of February. And you'll be able to access them, all registrants will be able to access them from there. Next week, we are delighted, in fact, to have Professor Dave Goulson, who's from Sussex University in England, and he will be talking not really so much about beekeeping, but about the decline of insects worldwide, which is the basis of a book he's written called Silent Earth, which I have read, and is really describing really the catastrophic decline of insects worldwide. And I think should be a very fascinating webinar, if at times possibly slightly depressing. However, again, as I said, I'd like to thank Randy Oliver very, very much indeed for that wonderful talk. And as I say, I would like to bid you all good night and hope that you will be listening in to our last two webinars. That's one with Dave Goulston next week, Professor Jamie Ellis on the final lecture. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.
All right, good night, everybody.